The winds over the Sahel have changed. They no longer carry the whispers of dependence, nor the dust of submission. They move now with intent, heavy, charged, and alive with the scent of defiance. And at the heart of this gathering storm stands a young man, Ibrahim Traoré, the soldier-turned-leader who has come to embody a nation's rebirth. Burkina Faso, once dismissed as a forgotten land at the edge of empires, now beats with a new rhythm, a rhythm of resistance. Traoré does not speak the polished language of diplomacy. He speaks the hard language of survival. To him, freedom is not a gift handed by history. It is a discipline, carved through struggle, guarded by vigilance, and renewed every dawn. Far from Ouagadougou, in the marble corridors of global power, that defiance sounds like thunder. Every step Burkina Faso takes toward true sovereignty sends tremors through boardrooms and embassies that once dictated its fate. But this story, this awakening, is bigger than one man or one nation. It is Africa remembering itself. Because what is happening in the Sahel today may decide whether Africa's next revolution rises or is buried before it can breathe. The Sahel has always been a place where history breathes in extremes. Its winds have carried the cries of empire and the songs of liberation. Its red earth remembers the weight of chains and the blood of freedom fighters. But today, those winds carry something new, a sound low and insistent, like an ancient drumbeat returning from silence. Across the deserts and dry riverbeds, something long buried is awakening. And at the eye of this storm stands Ibrahim Traoré, a man too young, some said, to bear the weight of a revolution, and yet too stubborn to bow to the ghosts of colonial power. When he rose to lead Burkina Faso in 2022, the world barely noticed. Western headlines mocked him as another military populist in a fatigued uniform. But those who truly listened heard something deeper, a defiance shaped not by ego, but by history. "We are not just fighting terrorism," he declared. "We are fighting a system built to keep Africa weak." Those words cracked like lightning across the continent. They carried the echo of names once whispered with reverence. Patrice Lumumba, silenced before Congo could breathe its first sovereign breath. Thomas Sankara, the son of Burkina Faso, who dreamed too boldly and was betrayed from within. Muammar Gaddafi, who envisioned an African currency backed by gold and paid for that dream with his life. Each of them fell not to fate but to manipulation, greed, and fear dressed as diplomacy. And Traoré, the student of their courage and their mistakes, knew this. True independence in Africa was never given. It had to be defended daily, so he began to strip away the old symbols of obedience. Foreign military pacts dissolved, colonial contracts rewritten to favor local hands, embassies reevaluated. For the first time in decades, Burkina Faso spoke with its own voice. To the West, it was reckless. To the people, it was rebirth. But revolutions, history reminds us, never go unchallenged. As Burkina Faso reclaimed its land, its gold, and its will, unseen hands began to stir. Ambushes in the north, explosions near the government quarter, propaganda whispered through radio waves and social media posts. Inside the presidential compound, intelligence briefings revealed the pattern. Foreign-funded networks sowing chaos, disinformation campaigns echoing Western talking points, money flowing through shadowed NGOs. It was not rebellion, it was interference. A war not fought with bullets alone, but with narratives. "You cannot kill an idea whose time has come," Traoré told his cabinet. But behind his calm eyes, he saw the ghosts of history repeating. The same script that buried Lumumba, Sankara, and Gaddafi, rewritten now in the dust of Burkina Faso. In the streets of Ouagadougou, people began to whisper his name as both prayer and promise. "Traoré," they said, "the one who will not kneel." Hope and fear mixed like smoke and wind. Because everyone in Burkina Faso knew one truth. When the winds of the Sahel shift, they never stop halfway. The attacks intensified, convoys ambushed, media infiltrated, rumors weaponized. Analysts called it hybrid destabilization, a strategy tested elsewhere, perfected here. Ignite small fires, fan them through rumor and misinformation, then offer international help once the flames grow too high. For Traoré, the mask had fallen. "We are not facing rebels," he said. "We are facing an industry of interference." He launched the Fortress Burkina Doctrine, a national shield built not from fear, but from necessity. Western outlets called it censorship. Supporters called it self-defense. Both were right. Because sovereignty is never clean, it's carved from the gray between freedom and control. Checkpoints rose, the military reorganized, the presidential guard transformed into a rapid response force. Loyalty audits swept through ranks and ministries alike. Infiltration begins with comfort, Traoré warned. We will deny it that luxury. The information front became the fiercest battlefield. State radio launched sovereignty briefings, daily broadcasts debunking falsehoods and reminding citizens why their fight mattered. For the first time, farmers in Kaya and students in Bobo Dioulasso heard their government speak directly, unfiltered by foreign tongues. Vigilance became a national virtue. In schools, children studied not just history, but disinformation. In markets, merchants discussed gold reserves and media propaganda. It was no longer just a revolution, it was an awakening. But awakening comes at a price. Civil liberties narrowed, opposition voices hesitated. Journalists learned to weigh words like gold. The line between defense and domination blurred. Western diplomats cried authoritarian drift, but on the streets of Ouagadougou, the response was simple. How can we speak of democracy when others can replace our leaders before we finish one term? Economic sovereignty became the next battlefield. Traoré restructured resource contracts, gold, lithium, and oil, ensuring profit stayed in Burkinabe hands. You cannot defend your borders, he said, if you do not own the ground beneath your feet. To critics, it was nationalism. To citizens, it was justice long overdue. By late 2024, the world had taken notice. European editorials painted Traoré as a young dictator in fatigues. African youth painted murals of him beside Sankara and Lumumba. To some, he was a threat. To others, a symbol. Proof that Africa could still rise from its own soil. And then came the shift, the resistance axis. From Mali to Niger to Chad, leaders scarred by the same foreign meddling began to align. What started as one man's defiance became a regional awakening. Defense compacts, shared intelligence networks, joint infrastructure, the dream of a united Sahel reborn from dust. Western policymakers called it authoritarian contagion. Africans called it sovereignty. Sovereignty is contagious, Traoré said. If one nation stands, others will find the courage to rise. Those words spread like wildfire. In universities from Lagos to Nairobi, students debated his speeches. On TikTok and radio, his voice became an anthem. Across the continent, the idea was reborn. Africa will no longer ask permission to exist, but freedom is never without consequence. Sanctions came, aid was frozen, investment fled. Burkina Faso, proud but isolated, turned inward. Its fortress held strong, but at a cost. Vigilance hardened into habit. Fear crept into daily life. A journalist rewrote a headline to sound less foreign. A teacher paused before questioning a decree. A mother, seeing soldiers on patrol, felt both pride and unease. The revolution had survived the world, but could it survive itself? Inside the presidential palace, the weight of that question pressed upon Traoré. Long after midnight, he read reports by lamplight, cyber attacks, infiltration attempts, whispers of discontent. You can defend a border, he murmured, but how do you defend a dream? He knew that walls built to keep the empire out must never become walls that keep the people in. Yet beyond the politics, something deeper was happening. For the first time in decades, the roads to the north were safe. Schools reopened. Farmers returned to their fields. The gold revenues, once siphoned abroad, began funding grain reserves and clinics. Maybe fear has its uses, a teacher said, if it lets our children sleep at night. Burkina Faso was not yet perfect, but it was standing. And in the Sahel, that alone was victory. Abroad, the narrative began to crack. The same voices that once condemned now hesitated. The same nations that preached democracy were quietly negotiating trade. Because deep down, the world understood. The age of control was ending. Africa was learning to breathe again. By 2025, the Fortress Burkina stood as both shield and symbol, a warning to empires, a mirror to free nations. Across Africa, eyes turned toward Ouagadougou. In cafes and classrooms, in villages and capitals, a new sentence began to form on every tongue. If they can stand, perhaps we all can. That, more than any alliance or speech, was Traoré's true victory. Not the power he held, but the courage he inspired. Because freedom, he knew, is not a moment. It is a discipline renewed each morning, sometimes through peace, sometimes through fire. The winds of the Sahel move again, carrying dust, hope, and a promise that no matter how long the night, there will always be men and women who refuse to kneel. Ibrahim Traoré has become more than a president. He is a question carved in flesh and resolve. Can one man's conviction outlast a world built to keep his people small? And in that question lies the soul of a continent, the heartbeat of a people who have decided once and for all that freedom, once awakened, will never sleep again.